Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the new news. My name is Paul, and I hope that you all are having a great day. I hope that you, your family, and your friends are safe, of course. And if not, I really hope that you guys find that safety and security in the very near future. There's obviously a lot of stuff going on today. There's a lot of stuff that's happened inside of Ukraine. There's a lot of stuff that's been happening globally. A lot of stuff, most of the stuff that unfortunately makes the news just isn't a lot of good stuff. So we do try and find, that's what those purple dots are. We do try and find some interesting or cool stuff, something a little bit different to kind of take your mind off of, really a lot of the horrific stuff that's happening throughout the world, whether that's the significant amounts of climate change, the conflicts that are ongoing throughout the world, obviously the war in Ukraine, which has been the main focus of pretty much everyone since it started back on February the 24th. So there's just a lot of stuff happening. And luckily, though, when it comes to all of this stuff, you guys have made an awesome community, and we're able to be, thanks to you guys, the news that gives back. Not only do we get to deliver the news to you, but we also are going to, you guys have made it able to, give back to the very things that we report on every day. And that's the important thing. That's what we're here to do. That's the whole aim of the project. We're not ever going to have super chats on the channel. We're never going to be pushing merch or any of that stuff. All of it is all for donations. Once we get large enough, we're going to have donations on the stream itself. So I'm really thankful for the support that you guys have given us already, and I really hope that you guys continue to support, even more importantly, the organizations in the description below. Please go check them out, and don't just focus on Ukraine, please. I understand Ukraine is the focus for all of this. It's the focus for our special reports every night, but the thing is that with the war in Ukraine, a lot of other places are no longer in the spotlight. Places where millions of people still need our help, including places especially in the Horn of Africa and other locations throughout the world. If you have more donation links, please, our link is in the Discord below. You guys, or our link to the Discord is in the description below. But you guys can go and check that out. And let a staff member on there know. Send us the link for your organization. Let us know what they do. Kind of give us like a short synopsis on what they're doing. And that way we can go through and start the vetting process on them. So we can continually just add more and more to that list below. And that's what we're going to be trying to do from here on out. So if you would like to, help, us further our endeavor here, that would be much greatly appreciated. But if you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. And if you can't give anything at all, that's totally understandable. Give us a like and subscribe. Let your friends know about us. The more people that come here, the more people that can, one, enjoy the news that we give, but two, and most importantly, the more people that can help us, make much more of a meaningful impact on people's lives throughout the world that are affected by these issues. And so with that being said, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump right into the special report here in Ukraine. So if we jump up here just north of Kyiv into the Hostomel Antonov Airport, we can see that billionaire Richard Branson actually visited Ukraine. Richard Branson was actually one of the very first individuals in the world to go into space as a tourist. But he has expressed a strong interest in restoring the Antonov Airport and the now infamous Antonov 225 Mirya, which was the largest aircraft in the world until it was destroyed by Russian forces at the Antonov Airport. And quoting President Volodymyr Zelensky, who joined him there today, he said, "We talked about maintaining global attention to the war in Ukraine, as well as prospects for the cooperation in the post-war reconstruction of Ukraine." Of course, we're getting that also from Next TV over here. So if you guys wanted to go check them out, that is the photo of all of them there. That is Richard Branson and, of course, President Zelensky. But as we start rolling further into the war itself here, we first hit up the Sumy region, where the shelling has intensified rather drastically over the last few days. So on June the 28th, so yesterday, Russian troops fired about 200 missiles at the Sumy region. 2 people were killed and 3 were injured. And that's coming from Dmytro, I'm going to try and pronounce this, Zivestesky, the head of the Sumy Regional Military Administration. Just as a PSA for you guys, I suck at pronunciation. I've said it over and over again. I barely speak English. So trying to pronounce a lot of this stuff, it's going to be rather atrocious, and I'm sorry. But anyway, so a lot of shelling there in the Sumy Oblast. We've seen a lot of people getting injured. We've seen a lot. It's not really targeting anything specifically. It's mostly just there to really conduct more or less a terror kind of thing. Just remind the people within the Sumy Oblast that the Russians are still able to hit them, and that's what we see here. There's no real strategic importance to doing this, and Chernihiv has received shelling as well throughout its oblast. Kharkiv continues, and this one really underscores that the most of no longer strategically or tactically important at this point in the war, despite it still maintaining, still getting heavily shelled. 2 dead, 9 injured here in rocket attacks on June the 28th. This is coming from Ole Subinov, who is the head of the Kharkiv Regional Administration. He says, quote, Russian occupiers fired missiles at the Kharkiv region on June 28th. 2 people were killed, 9 citizens were injured. Local residential buildings, outbuildings, a hospital, and kindergarten were damaged. Once again, that's coming from Ole there, who is in charge of the Kharkiv Oblast. The Kharkiv retained or continually is being shelled, mostly with Iskander ballistic missiles, Iskander Ms, coming out of Belgorod. They're being fired from missile systems up there. At this point in the war, Russia really doesn't have any strategic or tactical importance on hitting Kharkiv at this point. There could be some military targets, but realistically, any major military targets within Kharkiv would have been destroyed earlier in the war, where you saw a significant amount of artillery usage on Kharkiv while it was partially encircled by Russian forces. At this point in the war, those artillery systems are now no longer within range of Kharkiv, meaning that Russian forces have to rely on longer-range theater ballistic missiles, or TBMs, such as the Iskander M, in order to hit Kharkiv itself. And at this point, it's doing really nothing but causing terror. It's hitting civilian infrastructure, not really any military targets. It really doesn't seem like any of this is being pre-planned at all as to any specific targets that these missiles are trying to hit. And the Russian forces at this stage no longer have any viability in trying to capture Kharkiv itself, because if they were going to do that, it would have been much earlier in the war, and at this point they've been pushed too far back their standard artillery is no longer in range at this point, guys, so that they are pushed way too far back to even have any chance of retaking or having another chance at taking the city of Kharkiv, unless there's a dramatic shift in the war there on the ground. As you jump down here into the Severodonetsk and into the Luhansk region as a whole, we start to see some more some more developments here. And Lysychansk is under a significant amount of military pressure following the fall of Severodonetsk. Severodonetsk has fallen, and we know that Russian forces are starting to put an immense amount of pressure as the Battle of Lysychansk really starts to ramp up here. It's really ramped up over the last 24 to 48 hours, where we just saw shelling. At this point, we're seeing fighting on the outskirts of the city. And even here in Lysychansk, the general staff are saying that, hey, this situation, it's really becoming untenable as the situation continues to get dire. And so for the battle of the town at this point is continuing. The situation is very serious, and not much more information is known. There are some groups that are going into the front lines, but Lysychansk is under pretty much continuous shelling by Russian forces as Russian forces attempt to close with before that artillery has to shift their fires. And on top of this, we also know that this pocket is being pushed rather heavily. We see where so far 9 axes of advance by Russian forces within the Luhansk region alone, let alone the continuous part of this rest of the front in the Donbass. It's simply 9 axes of advance just in this small region. Here, right here, where my cursor is tracing now, is the outline for what is left of the Luhansk region. Obviously, the red indicates the relative general location, as we can confirm independently of the battle lines right now. And at this point, where we're seeing that, in this entire region, we have this major pocket here, which we know has closed at this point. It's starting to really start to close, and we see, if you take a look, we've shifted the map, relative to this today. This pocket is closing here, and there's a very significant risk of a large encirclement movement against Ukrainian forces. So it's hypothetical. We are led to believe at this point that Ukrainian forces are conducting at least a tactical withdrawal out of the Luhansk region in order to prevent encirclement of their forces in its entirety. On top of what was being said at Lysychansk, one of the things that was pointed out is that Bakhmut, which is another city that is a prime target for Russian forces, specifically coming out of the Popasna axis of advance, attempted to attempted a wide encirclement movement of Popasna and to further encircle the Luhansk region by a spearhead here in Spirne, which is a small village within the Donetsk Oblast, right here along the border of the Luhansk and the Donetsk, which we illustrated here as we shifted this once again to show that Russian forces have pushed up to Spirne, but have not been able to take the city thus far. Zolote did fall. I believe we officially reported that yesterday. So rather significant situation ongoing within this region, and we're getting a lot of that from the Kiev Independent as they're trying to currently take control of the Lysychansk-Bakhmut highway, which they've done to some success. However, we do know that the fighting is still occurring here. We saw as Cass is inbound. This is a Ukrainian Su-24 Fencer, which was spotted heading within the Luhansk Oblast towards Lysychansk in support of ground forces there. The airspace over Ukraine is still considered contested at this point, even this far into the war, and Russian and Ukrainian air forces have taken significant losses on both sides. But Ukrainian Air Force has had a rather large resurgence in the last about month and a half as they've been able to bring in new parts and new equipment in order to continue their campaigns. And we see that as they become more and more visible here on the front lines. Really, for the duration of the war, we haven't seen a lot of activity until about the last month and a half, 2 months from the Ukrainian Air Force. We saw snippets here and there and rumors. But what we're seeing now is visible, tangible evidence, and that shows that that Russian air superiority, at least localized air superiority, which they've enjoyed along most of the front lines to an extent, has really lost its touch. It no longer has that viability, and the Russians seem to be lacking most of the anti-air defenses for their forces within these regions to be able to accurately engage these Ukrainian aircraft. But we can see that here as an Su-24 Fencer is en route, as we can see, jump across here to Lysychansk to support ground forces, Ukrainian ground forces fighting in the region. Very quick snippet video. But that's the point. That's why he's flying this low. They're conducting very low contour and even to an extent nap of the earth flight, which means they're weaving in and out of trees. But this is something that pilots are training for, or have trained for. But what this does is it limits, as you can see, this is only a short 7-second video. But this is an aircraft. It's not even going with its afterburners at this point. It's just kind of, it's going at its cruising speed. And this is limiting the exposure time that any anti-aircraft defense systems, manpads or otherwise, would have to actually lock on to this aircraft to attempt to shoot it down. And that is the point of this low-level flight. You see that on both sides, especially those high arc angle of attacks with their rocket pods. That means that they only have to pop up long enough to fire their rockets and do an immediate break left or right, start popping their flares and chaff, and that means that it makes it very difficult for a lock-on by missiles. We've seen that anything loitering above really a contour flight level, like a Ka-52 that was shot down yesterday, really doesn't stand much of a chance, especially out in the wide open. And as we move over here into Dnipro, we have a little bit of an update. There was an attack on a gas station yesterday that they were currently digging people out of the rubble. And this is coming from Valentin Reznichenko, who is the head of the Dniprovetsk Regional Military Administration, who followed up with this and stated, rocket attack on a car service station in the city of Dnipro and the Dniprovetsk Oblast. Two dead victims, a man and a woman, were found under the rubble. The rescue operation is ongoing. So they're still trying to dig people out, but that is becoming a reoccurring theme throughout this entire front. Look at Kremenchuk yesterday. The immense amount of destruction that occurred when we aired that yesterday with the 48 hours of news. But that strike on Monday, and we'll get to a little bit more about Kremenchuk here later once we hit the international stage. But Zaporizhzhia has several different developments. Usually we only hear about 1 or 2 things coming out of the Zaporizhzhia Oblast. Today we have several. And so we're actually going to start up here in Zaporizhzhia, where we see that the IAEA has lost all remote connections once again at the nuclear reactor near Zaporizhzhia. So this is their remote connections and to the safeguard surveillance systems installed within that nuclear power facility. And this is coming from their official Twitter. The IAEA is also known as the International Atomic Energy Agency, and they make sure that nuclear reactors remain safe regardless of what the ongoing situation is. They were also the ones that were immediately brought in following the battle at Enahadar. Once Enahdar's nuclear facility had fallen, because there was CCTV footage that was actually being broadcasted live, if you guys were around for it, that when that city fell, that they were actually engaging the facility. They did not engage the power plant itself, but administration buildings on the outlier. Russian captives here in the Zaporizhzhia Oblast, and this is coming from Alexander Storuk, who is the head of the Zaporizhzhia Regional Military Administration, and he's quoted stating, "As of June 29th, Russian aggressors hold 149 Ukrainian civilians, including children, in captivity within the Zaporizhzhia Oblast. Part of the Zaporizhzhia Oblast is under the control of the Russian Federation and is currently occupied here, and that is one of the major concerns within this region." Is the fact that reprisals and internment of civilians within this region. There's a limitation to that under the Geneva Convention. There's a way to actually go about this. I highly recommend reading up on the Fourth Geneva Convention, adopted in 1948, go on through on 1948 and adopted in 1949, as well as just 3 additional protocols. But part of those protocols do include prisoner exchange, and that is the big news of the day for us here, because 95 of those defenders of the AZOVSTAL, 45 of them being from the Azov battalion, as well as a total of 144 Ukrainian soldiers, were swapped in the largest prisoner exchange of the war thus far. And so most of the prisoners that were brought back home are in extremely poor shape. They require immediate medical treatment, and we have a couple of different things here where you can see this. So they did publish some photos of the prisoner exchange. This is coming from the Ministry of Intelligence, I want to say. But 144 in total. Most of them are those who are severely wounded. But here is a video for you guys that was published.
Хочу попросити нашу владу, нехай вони приложать всі зусилля, щоб забрати з полону всіх цих хлопців, які там залишилися. А дякуючи їм, які вже навчені воювати і вміють робити свою роботу досконало, ми виграємо цю війну.
Very great to see. This is something that's been highly asked about. This has been something that has been really, what we've been looking forward to is, we're talking about with the AZOVSTAL surrender, and clear up until now is the release of those prisoners. That was kind of what seemed to have been the deal for the surrender of the AZOVSTAL. So these guys were planning on fighting to the last man within the AZOVSTAL, and that was supposed to be what seemed to have been the proposal was, hey, you guys we'll take them as prisoner, and you guys will we will then do prisoner exchanges. In return, we will surrender the AZOVSTAL and you will get prisoners back. And that is seems to have been the case. to an extent at least. And while it's not the totality of those prisoners, to see any at this point coming home is amazing to finally see. It's something that we've all kind of been looking forward to, and it's something that a lot of the world is asking, what is going to happen to them. Some of them were transferred to Moscow and were interred there. Or not interred, but they are currently sitting there in an internment camp. They're currently in prison there in Moscow, probably going to be facing for war crimes tribunals within Moscow, however that goes, or however your thoughts remain on that. But the majority of them, at least those in lower echelons of level, are returning home, at least to an extent. So that's very good to see. Very happy to see that kind of stuff happening. It's always kind of a light in kind of a really dark time. And the Institute for the Study of War has released another a backgrounder. They release a backgrounder on every single day. The Institute for the Study of War, if you guys have ever take a look at them, they are amazing. It's not an official government organization, but what it is there are many generals and high-ranking military officials from many countries that have come together to study conflicts globally, and they maintain trackers and maps and everything else. Very very well put together, very reasonable assessments on what's happening on the ground due to independent information that they can get their hands on. Satellite imagery, they have access to Maxar, so they can get live updates. But right now, what they're saying is that, according to their backgrounder for today, that Russia is planning to annex the areas of Kherson and Zaporizhia into the Russian Federation under the template of pre-1917, meaning that they would be annexing these regions in the same way that the Tsar would have annexed the location. Pre-1917 means that it would be the same. It would be the exact same. It would be the exact same as if the Russian Empire had control. Because these areas, as they list here, Tavria Gubernia is the historical province of the Russian Empire, which is these areas combined. But they release a map. Even during visits by foreign officials inside of Ukraine, we've seen that the actual officials from Ukraine have used the Institute for Study of War's maps to show, this is what was happening during the height of the war. This is what it looked like. This is what the map looked like and where you're at. So very accurate to a degree that even Ukraine is using it to an extent for some of its purposes. And it's a great record. We don't go by it, verbatim. We make our own independent decisions here, but it is something that we do reference, to kind of see what's happening on the ground, just because there are so many intelligent people within that understand. I was a non-commissioned officer, but I was not a high-ranking officer in the Marine Corps. I wasn't, I was enlisted. I got out as a corporal. I understand things at a small tactical level, but I cannot talk on a larger strategic level intelligently. I just never was trained to do that or think like that. My job was focusing on whatever my specific mission was and making sure that got done by me and whoever else was in my team. So that's kind of the insights I can bring to that, but they will be able to kind of tell you a larger strategic look at it just based off of their experiences and studies. We jump over here, and we're getting some images out of the Kherson Oblast, which really doesn't get a lot of images coming out of it. Most of the focus right now is in the Luhansk and the Donetsk Oblast, as well as some of the Zaporizhia region. But Kherson is still getting whittled down by Ukrainian forces. There are constant attempts to outmaneuver each other within this region, as the Ukrainians are at least trying to push them back to the Dnipro River. Which this region is still under control of the Russian Federation, but significant gains have been made over the last few weeks. We see them continually pushing, especially closer to Novokakova, and they are within range of hitting areas such as the Kherson airport outside of Chernobyevka, which is down here. There's also a significant amount of partisan activity within these regions, so that further disrupts the Russians' abilities. But we can see here some recent footage coming out of the Kherson Oblast that includes destroyed armored vehicles. So we can take a look at this.
Підарасище гарячий, сука, димить залупа єбана. Отак вам гандони орки єбані. Іванич!
So very short, you know, they're capturing a T-72, but the thing is that, you know, whatever you can get is important. What this tells us, the fighting is still ongoing. The fighting is still relatively heavy. There is heavy equipment being used in the Kherson Oblast. We know that Ukrainians are conducting military operations within an urban environment, at least, because we know that that is within some kind of a village or a town. We can tell that Ukrainian forces are still being rather tactically proficient in what they're doing here in the Kherson Oblast, because they are able to capture vehicles. We know that logistics issues are still hitting Russia because they are capturing vehicles instead of outright being destroyed, which means that they could be running out of fuel, they could have damaged, they could, you know, they could have run out of ammunition. We know that there have been several strikes against ammunition depots within the Kherson Oblast that have been relatively successful and have destroyed large quantities of ammunition, which further degrades their ability to supply, Russian ability to supply the front lines. Their helicopter fleets have been moved away from the Kherson Oblast and closer over towards Chaplinka, which is down here in the south, to a field base that they have created. So we have a general understanding of the situation within the Kherson Oblast. It's just there's not a lot of independent information coming out. Usually what this means and indicates, I should say, what this usually indicates is a significant amount of activity by Ukrainian forces. The Ukrainians inside of these regions don't want to show where Ukrainian troops are. They want to show where Russian troops are. That is why but the amount of partisan activity means that inside of this region, between Kherson and Novokakova and the outliers here, because of partisan activity, which if you go to Russian news organizations, they classify them as terrorist attacks, they are brutally suppressing the population. I'm talking, we've heard everything from a lot of missing persons, to say the least, to significant amounts of detainment, to an extent where we're pretty confident there's been execution, with torture, so all sorts of things. People are just going missing, and that is a pretty heavy suppression of the population in there. So we're not seeing the Russian side either. We're not seeing any side, and that's important to note, because the Russians are obviously very brutally suppressing these regions. The Ukrainians are obviously on the move because we're not seeing a lot of their activity, and so you have these two very conflicting things. And I think there's going to be a lot of things that come to light once Kherson is retaken, and Kherson and Novokakova are recaptured, or at least the bridges are blown. We know that these two bridges are rigged to explode once Russian troops have officially withdrawn across them, because they are concerned about that fact. We'll go over here to Mykolaiv, where there wasn't a strike on an apartment complex. There is one photo that we're not going to show here. It was shared by the Ukrainian parliament and about every single organization. If you go onto our website, which is also in the description, we have the maps for every day. This one will get posted as well tonight. You guys can go and check that out for yourselves, but I'm not going to be showing that on the stream here. But I wanted to leave it in there. I think it's a very important photo to see. So that's why I'm leaving that in there when we normally wouldn't. But a rocket strike hit a civilian apartment complex, and it killed 5 and injured 4. One of the victims who was killed was a 6-year-old girl. She was asleep in her room when the missile struck, and she was buried under the rubble. A dog was found alive and has also been saved after being trapped inside the building. We can take a look at that here. I mean, a direct hit. I mean, this thing is just absolutely collapsed. So that is the strike itself. You can see it's a direct hit. Like I said, it's a direct hit. So, and that's a ballistic missile. Like, that's a big missile to hit with something. That's, comparable in size to an extent with things like the one that hit the missile that ended up striking the mall.
це мій дом, хлопці. Вон машина бита, моя сусідня.
Please, someone, please tell me that that was a military target. I dare you to tell me that was a military target. We'll get to why I feel like that here shortly. Here in Odessa, though, according to the Southern Command of the Ukrainian forces, a Ukrainian air defense forces shot down a Russian missile in the Odessa region on June the 29th, quote unquote. So that we're seeing constant launches of missiles from the Black Sea Fleet. Most of these are conducted via submarine caliber cruise missiles that are being fired from Russian submarines because surface vessels are too at risk within the Black Sea. Those Harpoon anti-ship missiles are definitely taking a toll on the surface fleet itself. So pretty significant there. But with that is all of the news inside of Ukraine. But as you can tell, there's a pretty significant amount of news outside of Ukraine. And the first thing we're going to start off with here is actually in Moscow, where we have several points, 5 to be exact. Putin has threatened Finland and Sweden once again. And this is not the only country they threatened. They also threatened Lithuania, stating that they were readying their very severe response to Lithuania for if it did not lift the embargo on sanctioned goods to Kaliningrad. And Putin is also threatening Finland and Sweden as the Caspian Summit today. Putin responded to Finland and Sweden joining NATO, and stated that in the case of the deployment of the military contingent infrastructure, there will be we will be forced to respond in a mirror manner and create the same threats and territories from which they threaten us. You can see that here. This is Kommersant, Russia. A Russian news article regarding this. And also being reported by Reuters. In response to his calls of the terror attack, I will say terror attack on the Kremenchuk Mall, Putin has stated that nobody, quote, nobody fires at fields. The Russian army does not strike any civilian objects. There is no need for this. We have all the possibilities to determine what is where, and we achieve these goals with modern, high-precision, long-range weapons. Once again, RIA News, Russian state-owned government news agency, RIA Novosti. Once again, the Kiev Independent. Obviously, this is against very overwhelming evidence. He also stated today that the goal of the special military operation inside of Ukraine has not changed. In fact, it's still about the liberation of the Donbass. That is the ultimate goal. Liberation, quote-unquote. Once again, coming from RIA Novosti, which is the Russian state-owned news media source. And here at the UN Human Rights Council, the Russian Federation attempted to defend itself against misinformation and fight against the misinformation. And this is coming from their official post regarding this. So this starts off, statement by a representative of the Russian Federation at the 50th session of the UN Human Rights Council during a discussion on combating the negative impact of misinformation or of disinformation on the exercise and enjoyment of human rights and ensuring the adoption of human rights-based response measures. Geneva, and this was as of yesterday. Quote, Mr. President, the widespread dissemination of disinformation is a serious modern challenge. Nowadays, Russia is facing an unprecedented disinformation campaign unleashed by the Western states. According to experts, up to $25 million is spent on it every day, and the overall cost has already reached almost $3 billion. Over 14 million disinformation messages have been identified in the media and social networks. Authorities of a number of countries publicly declare their involvement in this illegal activity. We believe that today it is necessary to focus on countering the phenomenon of disinformation above all, by strengthening the media and information awareness of the population as indicated by the relevance by the Human Rights Council's resolution. We agree with any restrictive measures should be strictly proportional and consistent with the pursued goal. The politicization of the fight against disinformation and its use as a pretext for obstructing legitimate media activities is unacceptable. Most Western countries have taken restrictive measures against the Russian media under the pretext of combating disinformation. This broadcasting of Russia Today TV channel and Sputnik Radio was prohibited on the EU territory. Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia have banned the broadcasting of virtually all Russian TV channels and blocked access to the websites of the leading Russian media. The U.S. imposed sanctions against the TV channels Channel 1, Russia 1, and NTV. Private companies are curtailing their cooperation with the Russian media, succumbing to pressure from official authorities. We condemn such actions and contradicting international obligations of these countries. Twisted interpretation of the fight against disinformation is supported by the leading digital giants who resort to complete or regional blocking of the Russian media websites, their special labeling, imposing restrictions on downloading and deleting mobile apps. In this regard, we call on the Human Rights Council, the High Commissioner of the Human Rights Council, to respond and give principled assessment of such acts of blatant censorship and violation of the provisions of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, as well as a call for illegal restrictions on Russian media and journalists to be lifted. Thank you for your attention. If any of you have access to Russian media, just one day, I highly, highly recommend you go and take just 10 minutes of your time to scroll through just the headlines of the Russian media. You've already seen what they say about terror, being called terror attacks and everything. These are official Russian media sources. These are official Russian state-owned media sources that this stuff is coming from, because there is no independent news source in Russia. They're all closed, canceled, removed. Many of their journalists fled to Finland, in fact. And from their official government, it's no better, because this is an official tweet from the OSCE delegation of the Russian Federation. And this is despite the insane amount of footage to the complete contrary. Just take a look at this. This is their official statement. Dozens of meters from the shopping center of Kremenchuk, there are workshops of the Kredmosh defense plant, which weapons received from the United States and Europe were stored for shipment to the Ukrainian armed forces in Donbass. It was these plants that were destroyed by high precision strikes by the Russian aerospace forces. Once again, this is the Russian delegation to the USCE. It was a direct hit on a shopping mall, which, by the way, we showed yesterday that they had stated that it was not, it was an abandoned shopping mall. It was no longer used. There were over 1,000 people inside of the shopping mall when it took a direct hit by a KH-22 missile. A direct hit. This thing was developed in the 60s. It's not a high-precision weapon. It's shown to be inaccurate. It's been accurate for some time. It's been known to be inaccurate for some time. Because you know where else this thing was used? Afghanistan, 1989. Syria, clear up into the present. Basically, any military action that Russia's ever been involved in. Chechnya. The bombing of Grozny. Now, some people have indicated, maybe it was a failure of the motor. And this is something that's been brought up too. Well, maybe there's a failure. There's a failure of the weapon system constitute a war crime. Yes, because the known limitations and the known lack of accuracy of the weapon system that has been known for 60 years, mind you. This isn't like a weapon system that was developed in 2008 as a precision-guided munition. No, this is developed in the 60s as a precision-guided munition. You know how far we've come since the 60s in precision? The 60s, I could put it, I could put it in a block of where I wanted it. Now I can put it through your window. That's the level of precision-guided munitions we're supposed to be talking about. This is not a high-precision munition. It's not. It's a general bombardment munition, known for its inaccuracy. Under the Protocol 1 of the 1948 Geneva Convention, this was brought into effect in 1977 by all signatories and ratification under the Geneva Convention. Under Protocol 1, U.S. military all military planners are expected to weigh the risk in order to mitigate excessive damage and collateral to the civilian population. If you don't believe me, please go look it up. This requirement, knowing these limitations of the weapon systems and knowing the possibility for failure of the weapon systems or inaccuracy of the weapon system, is not risk mitigation within a high concentrated civilian population. That is why it is still a war crime. And it wasn't hit. They didn't damage the facilities at all because the mall itself took a direct hit. Speaking of Syria, Ukraine cut off all ties with Syria today. We'll get into that. Oh, man, will we get into that. I'm surprised that Syria wasn't already cut off entirely. But we'll get to that once we finish up Europe. We jump over here into Estonia, where Estonia is set to get an additional 1,000 troops from Britain. The UK has allocated an additional 1,000 troops, where there's already 2,000 located within the country, to Estonia. In light of recent updates of NATO's military objectives, the aircraft carrier strike group will also be based in the United Kingdom to deploy forward if needed. And we're getting this from the United 24. A significant increase. In fact, that significant increase just continues. We're going to continue down here into Madrid, where the NATO summit continued today. And several different announcements came. So NATO clarified what battle-ready troops meant, because this is something that needed to be discussed. Like, what do we consider battle-ready? Like is this like a, within 3 months of outbreak of war, can these troops be deployed? No. Within 30 days of the conflict beginning, these troops can be deployed on the front lines and engaged in combat within 30 days from any NATO partner. This comes as the increase of troops capacity within the allied NATO countries. That response force is going to be boosted from 40,000 troops to 300,000 troops. To give you an idea what that means, 300,000 troops. Russia and Ukraine, both sides, ended up fielding roughly between 200 and 250,000 troops for the invasion of Ukraine. So Ukraine fielded roughly about 210,000 troops, 220,000 troops. Russia fielded closer to about 250,000 troops. That's larger than the invasion force on the Russian Federation in the country of Ukraine. The invasion force of Iraq that the U.S. put together was 449,000 troops for the United States alone, for the invasion of Iraq in 2003. Okay? That is a significant amount of troops. That is a huge difference in troop numbers. That is a question of where do we put this many troops in Europe kind of troop number capabilities. So, pretty significant. And on top of that, in relevance to this, President Biden of the United States also announced the additional deployment of U.S. forces in the rotations to Europe in response to the immediate need for more forces. This includes the additional rotations of a brigade in Romania, creating a permanent headquarters for the 5th U.S. Army Corps in Poland, and also an additional deployment of 2 additional F-35 multi-role fighter aircraft squadrons to the United Kingdom, as well as enhanced rotational deployments to the Baltics. This means troops that will continue to rotate through as their units go out for a UDP training with NATO forces and obviously for security purposes within Europe. The enhanced means much bigger, more troops. Instead of sending a small, if it's the Marine Corps, they're going to send a MEU to Norway. They're going, or whatever. They're going to send a MEU to, Estonia. They're going to send, a Marine Expeditionary Brigade instead. They're going to, a brigade level of troops into Estonia. So instead of a couple thousand, you get 10,000 troops every time they rotate through. And they're doing that, if it's the Marine Corps, usually at about 6 months intervals. So, every 6 months you have 10,000 troops rotating into that country, ready to go. At 30 days notice, those guys are ready to go now. You jump up here into Amsterdam with a little bit of a different light of news, and that's because there's pretty huge protests by the country of the Netherlands, their farmers. And did I say Amsterdam? I'm so sorry. Anyway, so these pretty huge protests. The farmers are protesting because the Netherlands and their lawmakers were voting on proposals to slash emissions and damaging pollutants. And the plan will likely force farmers to cut their livestock herds or to stop work altogether, essentially. So there's a lot of pretty upset farmers in this region. This is because Europe is really, on top of everything else, focusing on pretty significant amounts of the need for climate change and precautions here. I think they're just a tad bit unhappy with the decisions. But that's a pretty significant decrease on their stocks and their livelihoods too. So you jump down here into Turkey. We jump over here to Ankara, where Turkey is going to be getting F-16s. The U.S. has kind of completely done a 180 on their policy. It's believed that this is actually one of the reasons why Turkey is going to allow Finland and Sweden to join NATO, is because the United States is going to lift the restrictions on them getting F-16s, which would revitalize their Air Force. And we can see some of that here. So this is coming from Nick Schriftman, who's the Foreign Affairs and Defense correspondent for PBS. And that brings us down here into Turkey. So pretty interesting developments here in Turkey and in Syria, because there's been some pretty substantial evidence that Turkey and Syria are buying stolen Ukrainian food. So there was a report that actually got put out, and I'll bring it up here. This is also something you guys can jump on the map. This is something you had to pay for. We pulled it from that. But this is, they're smuggling stuff into this is from the Financial Times. They're smuggling stuff into the Black Sea. And they actually brought up photo evidence of this. So this is out of AZOVSTAL. This ship specifically is the Fedor. And this is a ship that turned off its transponder as it approached Turkey in the Black Sea. And so they ended up, this is satellite images of the ship there in AZOVSTAL, which means it loaded there after initially they said, this is fine. There's no ban on the export or the import of Russian grain, and it did leave from a Russian port, but this satellite footage now shows the ship apparently being filled there in Sevastopol in Crimea. And once it's been laden, it then continued on to ports there in areas such as Turkey, where it had offloaded cargo from the ship itself, and was specifically corn, and also into Syria. Syria is a little bit more understandable. Syria is an ally of Russia. In fact, the Russian Federation heavily backs the Assad regime in Syria, but that's just not good. That's not a good light from a NATO ally. Pro-Turkish militants were killed during shelling in the city of Afrin. So the groups were shelled from an anti-tank system. This is within the province of Aleppo, and there was a group of them that were killed, and 5 more that were injured. And so the incident, apparently, they were hit, the mercenaries' car, by government forces. So in this general area, this is just to the north of Aleppo. We jump down here, we can see why Ukraine has cut all political ties with Syria, because Syria reiterated the fact that it will recognize the Luhansk People's Republics and the Donetsk People's Republic. So Assad stated this quite some time ago, actually, that he would recognize them, but the foreign minister of Syria has now formally stated that they will recognize the 2 regions as independent and sovereign nations, which is a big hit for Ukraine, and they're not very happy, to say the least, regarding this new development. As we jump down here into Israel, or specifically into Palestine, I should not say Israel, I'm jumping down here into Palestine. There's a shootout between the Al-Aqsa martyrs and the Israeli Defense Forces. They opened fire near the city of Nablus on the west bank of the Jordan River, but no further information has come about regarding any injuries or what the situation incurred. And you take a look here. Once again, another short video, but the violence continues inside of Israel. In fact, a lot of things are pointing to the Israeli Defense Forces actually shot and killed the reporter, and that's coming from multiple sources at this point, not just the Palestinians. So the violence continues within Israel and in Palestine between the 2 groups. Here in Iraq, we have a couple of different developments. First of all, here in Baghdad, security forces had to disperse a rally of demanding employment of students within Baghdad. Student protests really lit up Iraq a couple of years ago. That was a pretty major issue, especially in the city of Al-Naziriyah, which is there along the Euphrates River. And those protests did turn violent. In fact, there's a pretty interesting video from those protests where students in Al-Naziriyah actually went and they grabbed a lion from the local zoo and had it on a leash, and were using it against that was in response to Iraqi government officials. Of course, the government security forces had also opened fire with live ammunition against the protesters at that point and brought out military service working dogs on them. So they grabbed a lion. And take a look here.
Hey. Hey.
needless to say, they brutally suppress him. We really don't want to show some of that here. But they were not very. When I say dispersed, I do not mean politely, by any means. There are times that calls for it. When I was at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, we had to do that as well. There were 4,000 protesters there on Al-Kindi Street. It was not a very pleasant time. We used a lot of non-lethal ammunition and a lot of non-lethal, items that we had. 9-bangs, CS gas grenades, stinger grenades, the beanbag rounds for the 12 gauge. We used a lot of that. It's very significant. 40 millimeter, non-lethal grenades. So pretty significant though, and that's the protests inside of these regions turn very violent very quickly. But we don't really want to show a lot of that here because the Iraqi security forces, we were at least nice enough to use, non-lethal ammunition and kind of keep casualties to a minimum if possible. Iraqi security forces they're not very nice at dispersing crowds, to say the least. And also here in Iraq, we picked the Diyala province for this, but you could say this really anywhere, and that's because more land is becoming barren as a result of the very significant drought here in Iraq. Roughly 13 million acres, according to the Iraqi Ministry of Agriculture, more than 13 million acres are also known as dinams of agricultural land are now unusable due to the lack of water within the country. Severe drought has essentially dried up the Tigris River. The Euphrates River is still flowing, though I think it has also decreased significantly as well. The Tigris River is pretty much gone at this point. It is all but essentially dried up, and it's become a very destitute situation there in Iraq. Let's just jump over here into the United States. Jump up here to New York, where rapper R. Kelly has been sentenced to 30 years in prison. This is for federal sex trafficking charges, and some of his victims were not even 15 years old. He was also sentenced to 5 years of supervised release and a $100,000 fine. He is still facing additional charges for child pornography and obstruction of justice charges in Chicago. That trial is scheduled to begin in August. Couple of developments out of Washington, D.C. This is something we heard about yesterday, but to an extent, but we couldn't verify the source. But we now can, and that's because USAID has stated that, which is the U.S. Agency for International Development. This agency, the USAID agency, basically is the federal agency that oversees humanitarian aid for the U.S. government. And in response to the deadly earthquake in Afghanistan, they have announced that they will provide nearly $55 million in immediate humanitarian assistance. That is likely going to be followed on with additional funds as the U.S. Congress passes more. The statement issued on Tuesday stated that additional assistance would be used to support USAID partners in the International Organization for Mitigation, the IOM, and continue to reach earthquake-affected people and urgently needed shelter materials, water, sanitation, hygiene, and other relief items, whether that's, jerry cans of water, emergency shelters, clear down to, menstrual hygiene supplies, water treatment kits, and also lamps, clothing, and all of the bare necessities for human life. And the Taiwan delegation also arrived in Washington, D.C. to meet with U.S. officials. Lawmaker Johnny Chang arrived in Washington, D.C., where he met with U.S. government officials and politicians and others to exchange views on Taiwan's foreign relations and security regarding the Taiwan Strait. Taiwan and the United States have a very close relationship. Taiwan is the Federalist Party of China. They left the Chinese mainland after the communist takeover of China in order to, kind of leave persecution. They recently in history, I should say, in the last few decades, have become a democratic nation. And the United States has a pact with Taiwan that if Taiwan is to be attacked by China, that the United States will go to war with China. We will go to war. That is a pact. We will do it. And so far, tensions have been rising within the Taiwanese Strait, which has caused relationships within the region to continue to flare. There have been several summits regarding the issue, including even talk at the NATO summit as well, as not only Europe is starting to become a hotbed for activity, but also the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea, and increasing incursions of Chinese military aircraft and Chinese ships continue to kind of cause a lot of issues within that region. China is also rapidly militarizing their nation. They're rapidly modernizing their military force. They are making copycats of the F-35, and they're getting ready to launch a brand new aircraft carrier, as China has in the last decade gone from one of the smallest surface fleet navies in the world to having the largest surface fleet navy in the world, including outranking the United States. Jump down here into Texas, where yesterday we talked about how in Texas 50 immigrants were found dead in the back of a truck after they were illegally smuggled across the border here in Texas. So they were looking for the driver of the vehicle because the truck seemed to have been abandoned. The driver of the vehicle was actually posing as one of the surviving victims of the basically of the coyotes. No better way to put it. Individuals who, for payment, smuggle illegal immigrants across the U.S. border are called coyotes. They are very ruthless. They are very not okay. You have to usually pay them in segments, meaning that as you're going along, and these usually the rates usually are changing as you're going along. I personally have a friend that I met that you came across the border illegally, that I got to know very well when I was in high school. That also, after they were deported back, they also came back to the United States, as an adult, and they did that through coyotes. And I asked them about their experience, and they said they're very brutal. They said that they would stop in places along the route, and if you didn't have the money to pay them at that point on the route for that segment, they would take you out of the back of whatever vehicle you're being transported in. They would bust your kneecaps out, and they would leave you for dead on the side of the road in the middle of the desert if they didn't just outright kill you. So it's a very dangerous already endeavor for them, and the coyotes are rather ruthless in what they do. But over 50 of them did die. I believe about 16 were in the hospital, including this individual. But he has been arrested by U.S. officials. Out here, so a mysterious rocket has collided with the moon. Astronomers first spotted the rocket heading towards the moon last year, and subsequently it's crashed on the celestial body, but no country in the world has taken responsibility for it at this point. Let me take a look here. And the Norwegian the cruise ship Norwegian Sun collided with a small iceberg up by Alaska. After the incident, divers did inspect the vessel, which received minor damage, and is currently en route back to Seattle for repairs. I apologize; these people are very annoying. They're probably also drunk. They are on a cruise ship, after all.
My God, Titanic 2.0. Oh my God.
Yeah, we got a big old one.
Oh my.
We hit some iceberg.
We hit some ice. Oh my God. Oh my God.
Come here. Come on.
Whoa.
It's right here.
Oh.
It tipped it up. It broke it apart and everything.
Yeah, no thanks. I'm good, guys. They're supposed to be, launching a second Titanic, which they've pushed that back for I don't know how long at this point, and I really don't care, because I will never be caught dead aboard a Titanic. Bad, no, that's just not good. That's just not a good thing. But But yeah, so luckily it just took minor damage, though. It seems to have been a relatively small iceberg there up in Alaska. So it only took minor damage, and it is going to be back safely en route to Seattle to receive more further repairs. And as we start to wrap up our day over here, we jump over into Sweden, where Sweden is getting ready to launch the world's fastest electric ship. The flying electric boat rides on hydrofoils that lifts out of the water and helps it consume less energy than typical boats. These are usually the same type of things that are used for speed racing boats. The efficient electric watercraft has reduced energy usage per passenger per kilometer by 95% compared to current commercial ferries. A reduced drag of the hydrofoils allows it to maintain much higher speeds, helping the boat fly up to 30 knots or 34 miles an hour or 55 kilometers an hour, making it the world's fastest electric ship in the world, according to Candela. Its trial period is going to begin in 2023. If tests are successful, the Candela P12 will replace the vessels plying in Stockholm. So that is the ship itself. Pretty cool design. Other ships have used hydrofoil design before. Conventional watercraft have used the hydrofoil design before. But an electrical craft, it makes very good sense for the efficiency of it. And it's also pretty cool that they're switching over to an electrical craft as well, instead of your standard, usually diesel electric engines. And over here, a completely mummified mammoth was found in the Klondike region of the Yukon. And so, if we jump up here, which is over by Dawson City, this is the Yukon Territory. It's nearly 30,000 years old. It's a baby woolly mammoth that has been unearthed out of the Canadian permafrost by miners within the Klondike gold fields. So it's essentially perfectly preserved. It's just over 4.5 feet or 1.4 meters long, and it has much of its hair and skin still intact. So it's completely been mummified. It was made near Eureka Creek on the land of the Klondike Huichin First Nation in Canada's Yukon. It's called Nunchoga, or the big baby animal, in the Han language. Analysis suggests the calf is female and was around 1 month old at the time of death, putting her at roughly the same biological age as another woolly mammoth calf that was discovered in Siberia in 2007, the 42,000-year-old infant called Lyuba. Let me take a look at it here. This is really cool. Something can be preserved like that well preserved for that long. You gotta think that's got to be perfect, perfect conditions for that. And also, if you guys have ever heard of the history of this region, that's also just a really cool thing to take a look at too. But pretty cool. I mean, pretty cool thing overall. I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of studies done on that specimen, and hopefully they find a lot out from researching it. They're going to find a lot about what happened 30,000 years ago. I mean, what did the woolly mammoth in North America eat? That kind of stuff. So that's going to be pretty cool to find out. So, but that actually wraps it up for the news of the day. That's a ton of stuff that we have gone through and covered in a rather short amount of time. So obviously a lot of bad stuff happening throughout the world. You're talking about war, you're talking about drought and conflict and all sorts of stuff. I mean, and a lot of major developments internationally, geopolitically. When you're talking about, what's going on in the Taiwanese Strait, you're in China and the United States and NATO and Russia and the war in Ukraine and, all of, Finland and Sweden joining NATO, which is, they have said no to doing that for 70 years. So it's a pretty major developments. I mean, Syria, of course. So we're still waiting to see what happens with Syria regarding Turkey. I think they're probably waiting for all of these other big political events to kind of calm down a little bit after this. But pretty major developments overall. But a lot of them, unfortunately, are not good. And that really underscores the point of this channel. on what we're trying to do with this project. Not only do we want to report the news to you, but we want to be able to be the news that gives back. And that's the whole point. So you guys make that possible. It's only you as a community that can make that possible. So please be sure to check out the links in the description below and check out, all of them. Not just the ones for Ukraine. Of course, Ukraine is very important, and do not forget about it. But do check out the other locations, as they have had to have their Russians cut because of the war in Ukraine, and they've also had, they've also no longer in that spotlight. No people, a lot more people are focused on the immediate effects and not the effects of the rest of the world. So please be sure to give them your attention. If you have any more, our link for the Discord is also in the description. Please let a staff member know. We're happy to go through, give us a short synopsis, a link to it, and that way we can start the vetting process and hopefully add more donation links to that list. We are wanting to add as many as physically possible, especially if you're covering a region that we haven't gone to yet. We just don't have any links for it yet. And I'm talking about places like Brazil, where they've had severe flooding, India, where there's pretty severe flooding in parts of the region. There's pretty severe flooding that occurred down in Durban that killed over 400 people down there. I'm talking about droughts in different regions of the world, all across Africa, the Middle East. So if you can find any organizations to help support that, that'd be really, we'd be really grateful. The organizations in the bottom, we do vet them. The main two criteria that we have, amongst others, is one, that it's a reputable organization, meaning that we can go through and independently track everything that they've done and their expenses and how that's used and whatnot, etc. But also another major thing is that 80% or more of the proceeds that they receive through donations go directly to the programs, meaning that 20% or less go to those salaries and administration costs. The majority of the money that is given to them, 80 cents to every dollar that is given to them, goes directly to helping people. We don't want to be paying someone's salary. We want to be helping people with this channel, and I do mean it when I say it. So please, once again, thank you for giving the support to those groups, most importantly, and also to the channel. We really thank you guys for that. But if you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, give us a like and subscribe. Let your friends know about us. It helps us reach more people. The more people here, the more people can enjoy the news, but also the more people that can donate to these organizations, which is the most important part, and the more meaningful impact we can have in the world. And we're never going to do super chats on the channel. We're never going to be pushing merch on this channel. I have a full-time job. I don't care about this. I'm dedicating my time to this with no expectation of payment. Me and the rest of the team, because the staff are really the ones that put this together, so give them a hand. I just lend the voice. But they, we're all volunteering to do this because we want to help people throughout the world. That's the whole goal, and we can only do that with you guys. So once again, I want to thank you guys for being here. I hope that you guys enjoy a wonderful Thursday. You made it through halfway of the week now. And hopefully we'll see you again tomorrow. So I hope that you and your family and your friends remain safe. If not, I hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future, because I really don't want any of the viewers to be going through any of this, any of these scenarios. So please remain safe. I hope to see you guys once again tomorrow. My name is Paul from the New News, and you guys have a wonderful night. Talk to you guys later. Bye now.
Слава Україні!